Okay, so I'm going to start covering the book Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. It says 10 Things Nobody Told You About Being Creative. The ISBN number of the book, let's see, is 9780761169253. So I'm going to cover the first 3 chapters, and it's a very good inspirational book, and some of you will agree with, some of that you won't, of course. Now, in the first section, it says how to look at the world like an artist. Every artist gets the question, where do you get your ideas? I get this question all the time. People ask me that all the time. And I never thought about it this way. I just say they just happen. But maybe that's not the truth. I mean, when you read this book, it says the honest artist answer would be I steal them. Not stealing the way you think. So as you go through this chapter, you'll start to see what the author is actually discussing here, and hopefully have a better understanding of what he means to steal like an artist. I don't look at it as stealing either. I look at it as growing. But so how does an artist look at the world? First, you figure out what's worth stealing, and then you move on to the next thing. So it's kind of like unintentional stealing, like I said. Now, there's a quote by David Bowie on like page 6, and it says, the only art I ever study is the stuff that I could steal from. And this is when I start to think about this. I start to think about all the times I go to the museum, and my non-art friends, they run through the museum in 10 seconds, and then, I'm still on that first floor, really looking at some of the paintings. Well, it feels like 10 seconds, I'm exaggerating. But because you know what it is? I'm trying to learn. And I'm trying to learn off what artists have done before me. I'm looking very closely at the composition. I'm looking at the colors. I'm looking at the layering. I'm looking, how did they do this? And I'm dissecting it with my eyes and my mind. And in doing so, I guess this author is correct. This author is sitting there telling me that I am technically stealing. So he actually says nothing is original. Now, it's rough to hear that because everyone's like, oh, that's so original. It's such a new idea. A lot of times it's not. Like, it even brings me back to this one artist who was on Ukraine's Got Talent, and she draws in dirt, animates, live animation almost, like in dirt. She puts dirt down or sand down on top of a large video projector, and then she tells a whole 8-minute stories, which I'll include a link to for that underneath this video. So you guys could take a look at that. But it says nothing is original. And you know what? When I think about that, everyone's like, oh, that's such an original idea. She did a great job. And the truth is, it wasn't really original. We've been drawing in dirt forever. I mean, I'm sure we all sat around the campfire years ago and we draw pictures with sticks in the dirt. The original idea, I guess, maybe was, drawing it, recording it, and becoming known for it, her own story and her own ideas based on what happened before her. And they even have a Bible quote that says, nothing new under the sun. Which is, you'd like to think you're always coming up with new ideas, but I guess they're old ideas, but refurbished and made better even. Not even refurbished, but like expanded upon. Now it says here, some people find the idea depressing, but it fills me with hope. As a French, it says everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again. And I found that to be, pretty comical. And this is by Andre. That quote is by a French writer, Andre. If we are free from burden of trying to be completely original, we can stop trying to make something out of nothing, and we can embrace influence instead of running away from it. And that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, we're not really plagiarizing. It says, what is originality? The one person quoted, what is originality? And somebody said undetected plagiarism. And I don't look at it that way, but I mean, I could see their point. And I think it helps loosen you up into, creating your own ideas and trying to create something original. Knowing it doesn't have to be 100% original. We're all made up of, our surroundings and our environment and what we've seen in our lives. So it's better to see as much as you possibly can, because it'll just make you better as a designer. All right. And they have an interesting thing where to talk about some lines on page 9 that you should take a look at. And they talk about a good example of all this is genetics. You have a mother and you have a father. You possess features from both of them. But the sum of you is bigger than their parts. You're a remix of your mom and dad and all your ancestors. Which makes sense. So we're a remix of everything that we've been surrounded by. And that's what, the art we produce is based on our, our surroundings and our environment and our beliefs. Around page 13, they start talking about the artist as a collector, not a hoarder, mind you, but there's a difference. Hoarders collect indiscriminately. Artists collect selectively. They only collect things that they really love. There's an economic theory out there that if you take the incomes of the 5 closest friends and average them, the resulting number will be pretty close to your own income. I think the same thing is true of our idea incomes. You're only going to be as good as the stuff you surround yourself with. Now it says here, instead chew on one thinker. Writer, artist, activist role. So I'm skimming down. It says, all right, let's not do that. Let's go back up to the top of page 15. Marcel Duchamp said, and I'll put up some links of his work underneath here that you could go to those websites and take a look at his work if you're not familiar with him, because you should be familiar with him. I don't believe in art. I believe in artists. This is actually a pretty good method for studying. If you try to devour the history of your discipline all at once, you'll choke. Instead, chew on one thinker, writer, artist, activist, role model you really love. Study everything there is to know about the thinker. Then find 3 people that thinker loved and find out everything about them. Repeat this as many times as you can and climb up that tree as far as you can go. And once you build your tree, once you build your tree, it's time to start your own branch. So then you start branching out based on everything that you learned and grew from. Seeing yourself as a part of a creative lineage will help you feel less alone as you start making your own stuff. And this is what the author states. And it's an amazing way of looking at it. The great thing about dead or remote masters is that they can't refuse you as an apprentice, which is really funny because, it's really the honest truth. Like, you're going to be their apprentice. You're going to learn from them. I learn from everybody, like I was saying before, in the museums that I go to. Or anything I look at, even magazines. Every time I open a magazine, I'm constantly looking and learning based on what people in the past have done. It becomes part of my vocabulary. It says you can learn whatever you want from them. They left their lesson plan in their work, but you have to tear apart their work to do it. That's the part, So it says, school yourself. Education is another. The two don't always overlap. So you don't always have to go to school or learn just being in school. I'm constantly learning. I'll never stop learning. It says here, carry a notebook and pen wherever you go. Get used to pulling it out and jotting down your thoughts and observations. Copy your favorite passages out of books. Record overheard conversations. Doodle when you are on the phone. But I look at it this way. We can record everything in our phones. We can even doodle on our phones. I'm going to talk about a swipe file. So basically you're stealing and keeping a swipe file. And, it's funny is I catch myself doing this without even, before I even read this book, where I'll take pictures of things that inspire me for future work. So it says, it's just what it sounds like, a file to keep track of the stuff you swipe from others. It could be digital or analog. It doesn't matter what form it takes as long as it works. You keep a scrapbook and cut and paste things into it, or you could just take pictures of things with your camera phone. See something worth stealing, put it in a swipe file, need a little inspiration, open up the swipe file. It says, it is better to take, and it's on page 23, it is better to take what does not belong to you than to let it lie around neglected, by Mark Twain. I get it, it's, if something's not really being used, then you could take it and you could refurbish it into your own ideas. I mean, I would always like to give people credit and be honest about that. But if it's so different from the original, it just inspired you to go in a totally different direction, then you're not really stealing anything. And, let's see if we go here. Now, I'm going to talk about Shepard Fairey and the Obama poster in a little bit. What I'll do is I'll post, link, and some of you have had me in class before know, what I'm talking about with this, how the one artist, he's actually in a lot of art appreciation books now. He was a famous street artist who then ended up making a famous poster for the, right around the time Obama was going to be elected, and he became well known for it because he also had to go to court because he stole the image itself from a newspaper who the artist who is a photographer went to school, spent a lot of money on their education. Here they are taking a professional photograph, putting it in a newspaper, and this guy just comes by and steals it and becomes famous for it. And they ended up settling out of court, so I wish that they didn't, but they did. Anyway, I'll post that link below too, a couple of links to that, so you guys could take a look at that. All right, now the next section is 2. Don't wait until you know who you are to get started. Basically, just start, and you start to learn who you are by starting. You grow and you change. My work is nothing like it used to be. Make things know thyself is what's on page 27. If I waited to know who I was or what I was about before I started being creative, well, I'd still be sitting around trying to figure out myself, figure myself out instead of making things. In my experience, it is the act of making things and doing our work that we figure out who we are. You are ready, just start making stuff, and eventually you'll find exactly who you are, or you'll just find out that you're always growing and changing. And there's this saying called fake it till you make it, and they start talking about that on page 29. And it says, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exit and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And it says, this is a fancy term for something William Shakespeare spelled out in his play, fake it till you make it, but he said it in those words. So all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And I like that. I think it's something that is worth sitting there thinking about. So now the phrase on page 30, the author goes to tell you that fake it till you make it. Pretend to be something you're not until you are. Fake it until you're successful, until everybody sees you the way you want them to. Pretend to be making something until you actually make something. And he also talks about his inspiration of a book called Just Kids by musician Patti Smith. It's a story about how 2 friends who wanted to be artists moved to New York. And I haven't read that book yet, but I'm kind of inspired to do that based on this book. So hopefully I get a chance to do that at some point. It's called Just Kids. All right. They get into start copying on page 32 and 33. Now, to finish it up, it says the fake it till your makeup comment. It says, all the world's a stage. Creative work is kind of a theater. The stage is your studio, your desk, your workstation. The costume is your outfit, your painting, pants, your business suit, or that funny hat that helps you think. The props are your materials, the tools, the medium. The script just plain old time. An hour here or there. Just time measured out for things to start happening. And just start copying. Just start doing it. You're going to copy stuff until the stuff becomes your own. I mean, you learn by copying. Nobody was born with a style or a voice, is what the author is saying on page 33. We don't come out of the womb knowing who we are. In the beginning, we learn by pretending to be our heroes. We learn by copying. Start copying what you love. Copy, copy, copy. At the end of that copy, you will find yourself. And that's a quote on page 33. We're talking about practice here, not plagiarism. I agree with that. You don't want to plagiarize. All right, so I'm going to skim over. They even have quotes by Salvador Dali. Those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing. It's interesting. On page 38, they start. The author says, at some point, you'll have to move from imitating your heroes to emulating them. Imitation is about copying. Emulation is when the imitation goes one step further, breaking through into your own thing. And they have a whole section about good theft versus bad theft. You should take a look at that. And then in the end, on page 41, before we get into the next chapter, one of the very last sentences, adding something to the world that only you can add. So basically, you're going to take all those ideas and everything that you copied and learned from, everything that you grew from as an artist and your surrounding world, and you're going to add something to this world that only you can, because it's from your perspective.